Good evening. Welcome to Tennessee Informer. I'm your host, Dave Vance. Tonight we have a great show lined up with our special guest, Representative Jody Barrett from District 69, who is running for re-election. We'll be diving into some hot button issues concerning election laws, the Second Amendment, and the critical topic of protecting our children by removing obscenity from our schools. You don't want to miss this, so stay tuned. Quickly, first, I want to remind you that if you have an announcement from a conservative organization that you would like to broadcast on this show, please send the information to teninformer.tv@gmail.com the Friday before the show. If you want our state to stand up to federal overreach, the best way to do that is support the nullification process bill sponsored by Senator Bowling and Representative Holsey that they intend to bring back next session. Visit tncss.weebly.com/call to action, sign the petition, and follow the instructions on the link. Our state senators and reps need to know that we want this legislation passed when they return in January. Now's the time to get candidates for state office on record as well. D.C. will never fix D.C., only the states can fix D.C., and we have to demand that our states stand up to D.C. and uphold their oath to the Tennessee and U.S. Constitution. Now to our guest, Representative Jody Barrett. Thank you for coming on. How are you doing tonight?
Doing very well, sir. Thanks for having me.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. You just finished your freshman year, or your freshman term.
Yes.
And so let me ask you this, a little late to the game, but what made you decide to run initially?
Well, it's kind of funny. The person that had this seat before me was Representative Michael Curcio, and he announced 15 days before the filing deadline that he was not going to run for re-election, which kind of left everyone in a mad dash to see who was going to run to fill the seat. And the first person to pull the petition was somebody that I knew very well and had actually been a county commissioner here locally. And nobody else was really coming forward to jump into the race. So it looked like he was going to run unopposed. And through the course of that mad dash there to figure out what was going to go on, I talked to my wife with about a week left to go, and I said, I think I might have to run in this race just to make sure he doesn't run unopposed. And she said, I know, as if she knew all along I was probably going to do that. So that's what got me to pull the petition and get going.
Now, District 69 is Dixon, Hickman County, what's part of Murray, I think?
Well, they redistricted it. It's all of Lewis County now,
okay.
All of Hickman County, and about 2/3 of Dixon County. So no Murray County anymore.
Okay. It's still a pretty big district, though.
It's a haul going north to south, I can promise you that.
So, as a freshman, just finishing up your term, what surprised you or disappointed you about being in the legislature?
Well, I don't think there was a whole lot of surprises from a operational standpoint. I had the privilege of being a college intern, legislative intern back in the 90s. I'm 50 years old now, so it was a long time ago. But working in the legislature for a session as a student, getting the chance to see kind of how things work, how the bills work through the process. So none of that was really shocking or surprising to me. But the common answer that I give to that really is getting up there and getting to know the that are serving and finding out how many of them truly are doing it for the right reasons, or dedicated to, their work to God and honoring Him, and truly good Christian people that are trying to do the right thing. That part was pleasantly surprising.
So you think there's more of those than what we might think out here?
I really do. Yeah, I do think so. And even the folks that sometimes we get upset with that maybe don't vote as conservatively as we would like them to do, I do believe them to be true, good Christian people that mean well, but sometimes they just get pulled in the wrong direction.
Right. A lot of pressure up there, a lot of lobbyists. We talked about that a little bit yesterday when I had Representative Todd on the show, that people have to show, our people have to show up. They have to, if they can't show up, they have to at least call or email because the other side is always there and in force. And you're still going to be affected whether you're involved or not. So you have an opportunity, the people do, if they will get themselves involved, to influence what comes out of there. Because you guys do pay attention. If you start getting enough calls on something, you can't just ignore it.
Well, that's the one thing I've tried to really be good about, is being available and transparent to the people in my district. I'm fortunate that I live where close enough that I can drive back and forth from the Capitol. I don't stay up there during the week. I like to come home and sleep in my own bed so my wife knows where I am every night. But it also gives me an opportunity to see people back home and hear from them directly. They don't have to try to catch me through text message or email. They can talk to me at the coffee shop in the morning before I'm driving into the Capitol. And so I get a lot of really good feedback from the folks, and I use that whenever I go to the Hill.
Yeah. And just to clarify, I meant that legislators in general, if their constituents are constantly calling, constantly emailing, or if they can make it up there, that does have an impact. A lot of people think, nothing makes a difference. But, I've seen it, and I know you've seen it, that, you start getting a lot of calls, and it does have an impact. But I think a lot of people out here don't realize that.
Well, and I will tell you this, it helps too when you're making the argument that you're taking a stance that may not be popular. It helps that when you can say, look, I am voting this way, or I've taken this position on this bill because I have heard from my people. I've gotten a lot of phone calls. I've gotten a lot of emails. And that gives you a lot of positive reinforcement to be able to hold the line and stand firm on what you know to be right.
Right. Especially when leadership is pressuring you. Not that leadership would ever do that, but, just in case they might, right?
Well, everybody has an angle, right? Whether it's leadership or lobbyists on the other side or Democrats on the other side of the aisle, everybody has an objective that they're trying to achieve. And when it doesn't line up with yours, then they can definitely try to apply pressure to you, for sure.
So election time is on us again here locally and throughout the country, and there's a lot of concern about illegal alien voters. You had some legislation to prevent that. It didn't get through this year, but let's talk about that bill and who was opposing it. And this was some obviously needed legislation. So I think it was House Bill 2034, if I remember correct.
Right. That was the driver's license bill for temporary driver's licenses that we issue here in the state. And what folks probably don't know, a lot of people don't understand, is that we do issue driver's licenses to non-citizens. And there's a requirement for what they have to show and what documentation they have to have in order to be able to get a license issued to them. But what folks don't understand is that when they do get a temporary license, it's good for 8 years. And the only indication on the license that they are not a U.S. citizen is an X on the middle of the license. There's no real bright, shining definition that says, hey, this is not a U.S. citizen with this license. And so that's what my bill was aiming to do originally, was to redesign the temporary license that we issue to non-citizens. And so that it would say clearly in big, bold letters, non-U.S. citizen. And then I also wanted to shorten that term down to 2 years, so that every 2 years they would have to come back into the DMV, check back in, update their address, maybe update their photograph and all of that, so that we could kind of keep better tabs on these folks and make sure that they're not people overstaying visas or overstaying their authorized visits to the country.
8 years is a long time. It's crazy that it was ever that long. So that didn't get through. Well, let me back up just a second, though. So that temporary license, you mentioned they had to show certain things in order to be able to get it. What is it they have to show? And with all the people coming across the border now, all the Biden-led invasion of our country, I'm assuming that a lot of them are going to end up with these licenses. Is that correct?
Well, and that's a big problem that we have in the law, and something that I hope to address this next session whenever we get back in. Right now, currently under Tennessee law, the only thing that is required in order for a non-citizen to get a license is that they show that they are here for a federally authorized purpose for a specified period of time, which typically means a work visa or a student visa, something along those lines. But with the way this administration has been dealing with folks coming across the southern border, the documentation that they're giving them saying, hey, you're okay to be here for up to 3 or 4 years before we finally get a hearing scheduled for you. I'm concerned that the way the language is currently under state law, that it's so broad that can be used to argue that we need to be issuing driver's licenses to all of these folks that we know are not here legally. So I want to try to do something with that to make sure that we narrow up that language and lists specifically what federal documentation is required before we as Tennessee, as a state, will issue a driver's license to them. As far as the bill goes and why it didn't pass, the first pushback I got was from the governor's administration, Department of Safety, that said that, look, if we redesign this temporary license, it's going to cost all this hundreds of thousands of dollars that we're going to have to buy new software and equipment to redo this. And they put a huge fiscal note on it. So that was the first pushback I got. And then in working with the Department of Safety and with the House Transportation Committee chairmanship, we were able to eliminate that part of it, but agree that everybody would support, including the governor's office, reducing the time period down to 2 years. And so we had everything that we needed in the House side of things to get that pushed through, and actually had some really positive support and commentary coming from Department of Safety for that. But unfortunately, our friends in the Senate decided that they did not like that bill, and they killed it on the Senate side.
Killed it in committee, I'm assuming.
Yes. Never. I don't know that it even got a second for a vote, but it definitely did not come out of committee.
Who was the sponsor, Senate sponsor?
The Senate sponsor on that bill, I believe the Senate sponsor on that bill was Joey Hensley.
Okay. So Senate, the Senate seems to be the culprit for killing a lot of good legislation. Our House is definitely better than our Senate. It's not great, but it's a whole lot better than the Senate. And there's a lot of times that we have good legislation, common sense legislation that most people support, and it gets to the Senate, and you said this one didn't even get a second, which usually I suspect, and this is just me, can't prove it, but if it doesn't get a second and it's a good conservative bill, we got a supermajority.
Right.
My assumption is that leadership didn't want it. That's my assumption.
And honestly, something happened. There was a lobbyist firm that came in and got involved with that bill somewhere along the way, and they didn't come talk to me before they tried working on the Senate side. But even some of our conservative folks in the Senate that we are typically would consider very reliable votes for things like this, they also ended up having some heartburn and backing off away from their support for the bill. So at the end of the day, it was evident that the bill was going to die in the Senate. I don't know that I could point a finger to any single senator or person that was responsible for that, but even folks that we ordinarily would rely on weren't willing to get with me and fight for that.
Did they say why?
Again, I think there was a lot of concern from probably the Chamber of Commerce side of things about businesses and hurting students that are here on student visas, making life more difficult for them where they had to come back into the DMV on a more regular basis. But the funny thing is, in talking to Congressman Green's office and getting some statistical data and preparing for presenting that bill, the highest rate of overstays for any visa are student visas. It's over 85% of student visas overstay their time here in the U.S. So if you've got someone that's here on a student visa and they've got an 8-year driver's license and 2 years into it, their visa gets revoked or they transfer out or for something happens that they're not supposed to be here anymore, they still have what's on its face a valid driver's license for another 6 years. And they can stay in the state without having anybody to check in with anybody until they have to go renew that driver's license 6 years later. And so that was the whole point of trying to reduce that number, is so that we could get them coming back in and checking in with the state more often to give us a better grasp of how many folks we had in the state that were not citizens, where they were, how they were moving around the state, things like that. Because if we don't gather that data, then there's no way for us to truly understand how big of an issue it really is.
Absolutely. So this bill, you're going to bring it back next session, but that's going to be after the fact for this upcoming election. Do you know if the election commission, the state election commission, is doing anything to get the word out to the election commissions at the county level of what to look for on these licenses so that people that are not supposed to vote are not voting?
Right. And there's a grassroots push being done right now with Citizens for Renewing America. There's another group that's led by Kathy Harms that's doing a lot of work on election integrity. And they're trying to get out and educate our county election commissions the people that are going to be poll workers, that are going to be their volunteers, to get them the information that they need. And I'm reaching out to the Secretary of State's office as well to try to get them on board to make sure that we know we have voter ID in Tennessee where you have to present your driver's license. But if you look at your personal driver's license right now where it says class on the face of the license, and you'll see a D or maybe a CDL, something along those lines, a temporary non-citizen temporary license will just have an X. And most people, probably 95% of the people that are volunteering at an election precinct, probably don't know to look for that. And so I just think it's going to be better for all of us that if we're able to redesign that license, it'll make it much easier. But in the meantime, you're right. We've got to educate the folks that are going to be working at our polling places to make sure that they know exactly what to look for so that we can kind of weed these things out, not only to protect the integrity of the elections, but also to protect these non-citizens that may be misled into thinking that it's okay for them to come vote because they have a driver's license.
Well, I appreciate what Kathy Harms is doing on that and Citizens for Renewing America. But, that's really something that I would think our state would take the lead on. I mean, it's bad enough that this bill didn't just make it right through when it's obviously needed in this day and age. But since it didn't, and since they know we're vulnerable, that's a no-brainer. They should just be going all out to make sure that everybody knows what to look for. I think it's sad that I appreciate the private organizations that take up the mantle, but I think it's sad that they have to. That our state, the people that should be doing this, from the Secretary of State's office, are not leading the charge on this. So hopefully they'll come around.
And I agree with you, and it's a common refrain that I have reiterated to the Secretary of State ever since I got elected 2 years ago. In that, yes, Tennessee is doing better than most states when it comes to election integrity, but that doesn't mean that we're doing near enough, and that there's a lot of areas that we can improve and make things much better. And what I continue to tell Secretary Hargett is perception is reality. And right now, the perception by the voters is that we've got a problem with election integrity in this country and even here in Tennessee. And if you continue to brush that aside and pretend like it's not a real issue, and kind of toot your own horn on the things that you have done well and received notification or notoriety for, then the people are going to think that you are ignoring the issues that they think are serious matters. And so, again, perception being reality, we need to provide the perception in Tennessee that we care and that we're continuing to try to improve every day in every area that we can to protect our elections and make sure that the votes that we cast as U.S. citizens, as Tennessee citizens, count one for one.
Especially when we have the Biden administration trying to undermine us on this issue and everything else. I would think our state would step up, but I do appreciate your effort on that. And you had several other election bills that you tried to get through. Let's talk about some of those.
Sure. Well, my first year, I did run probably 4 or 5 election bills that all kind of crashed and burned. I was able to, when you start a new job or you take on a new task, sometimes you have to touch the fence just to see if it's hot. And I found out in my first year that the electric fence was on when it came to election integrity in that certain subcommittee. But since then, I've been able to make some headway talking to the chairman and subcommittee chairman and starting to actually get some movement. I think we're going to be able to get some things done in the future. But look, we can't continue to allow our primaries to be open. I mean, it's very obvious that the vast majority, if you look at this year, there's a very large number of precincts or districts that are running unopposed in the general. I don't have a general Democrat running in our general election. And so that leaves the folks in that minority party with no choice but to cross over into the primary and try to monkey around with who we get elected in our primary elections. The Baptists aren't going to let the Catholics come over and vote on who the next pastor is going to be. The Yankees aren't going to let the Red Sox decide who the next manager is going to be. We shouldn't be doing that in our primary elections either. So I'm hopeful that we got close this year, closer probably than we've ever had or ever been of getting something like that done with closing our primaries. So I'm hopeful that we're going to continue moving that in the right direction and maybe get that done next year.
Yeah. For years I heard that, and this was before you were in office, well, if we get the SEC to support closing the primaries, we'll do it. And that happened in 2019, late 2018, early 2019. And 2019 was, of course, right after Governor Lee was in office. And that was one of the early bills, one of the bills that session that came to the House and to the Senate. And the House killed it. And my understanding is the governor didn't want it. But it took all those years of finally getting the SEC on board. And then we get, the legs cut out from underneath us for closing the primary. So it's disappointing that so many Republicans are fine with open primaries. And I agree, we've got to get that closed. Now, there was another thing that the party did within the last couple of years where they charge a fee for you to run as a Republican. I think you had some legislation dealing with that as well.
I did. As a new candidate, I didn't like the idea that I had to pay anybody for the right to be on the ballot. And I understand why the party does that, it's a way for them to generate some revenue and cover the costs of running these primaries. But also, it's also a way to make sure that they're getting serious candidates only and not folks that are just trying to get their name on the ballot and muddy the water, so to speak. That being said, though, we shouldn't have a ballot tax, for lack of a better term, in order for you to get your name on the ballot, that you have to write a check for $500 or $1,000 or $2,500, whatever it may be for the office that you're running for. That just doesn't seem right to me. It doesn't seem American. It seems to violate the very premise of what the country was based off of. And so, yeah, I ran that bill. My very first session up there probably ruffled some feathers. But you know what? We got that bill passed in the House. We got all the Democrats to vote with us, and we got about 30 some odd, 31 to 32 Republicans to vote, and we got that thing passed in the House. And once again, our friends on the Senate just let it sit there and didn't do anything with it.
Yeah. With friends like that, yeah. Another topic that's really hot all across the country and in our state always is the whole Second Amendment and the gun issue. It should not be this hard to pass pro-gun legislation in Tennessee, but it's a whole lot harder than you would think it would be. But you were able to get at least one good piece of pro-Second Amendment legislation passed. Well, let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so once again, I proposed several Second Amendment bills in my first year, brought a couple of them back and filed them again this second year. The biggest one I was trying to get done was the misdemeanor charge for an enhanced carry permit holder walking into a posted business. I just tried to get the law passed where we could remove the misdemeanor charge, allow the private business owner to still post their business, but just make it where it wasn't an automatic crime subject to punishment for walking into some posted business. Unfortunately, the Department of Safety, again, and the governor's office absolutely hates that notion, and they've fought me tooth and nail on that. Once again, I had the votes on that to get that out of committee. I got it out of subcommittee and had the votes to get it out of the full committee in the House, and they killed it on the Senate. So you're sensing a theme here when it comes to my list of bills that I had filed last year. But the big one we got passed was the red flag preemption law. And, coming out of the special session where the governor tried to get us to adopt a red flag law in Tennessee, it was very clear that there was no support for that in the state legislature, particularly in the House side of things. And so that off season coming, through fall leading up into the regular session in January, I did some research on other laws that were out there with regards to red flags, and I found that Oklahoma had what was called an anti-red flag law. So I did some digging on that and found that what they had done is they had preempted red flag legislation and extreme risk protection orders at the state level so that no municipality or county government could adopt their own red flag ordinance at the local level. And if you could imagine what that might look like in Tennessee, where we have a super majority at the state level, but we have very left leaning city councils in Memphis and Davidson County, Chattanooga, or Knoxville, that they may say, okay, state, you're not going to pass a red flag law, but we want one here in our city. And so we're going to adopt that and enforce it here. Well, what that would create is, multiple different variations of the law across the state where gun owners wouldn't know what the law was whenever they went from county to county. Law enforcement wouldn't know how to enforce it. And so it was just going to be a nightmare that I saw in the development stages. And so we proposed our bill to eliminate that here in Tennessee. We modeled it after Oklahoma, and it ended up passing. I think I had 56 or 7 House sponsors on that bill, and it passed with overwhelming majority.
Well, good, because I can see, and matter of fact, I'm really kind of surprised that some of the urban areas haven't already done that, because every metro area in our state, just like every metro area across the country, is blue, and most of course, that includes most of them being anti-gun. So I'm glad that was able to get through, and that it didn't die the normal death in the Senate. That so much other good legislation seems to go to the Senate and die. I'm hoping that we've got several senators that are being challenged this year in the primaries. I'm hoping that we can at least get rid of a few of them, especially the biggest offenders, which just so happens all the biggest offenders are up for re-election this year. So hopefully that'll turn out in our favor.
Janice Bowling was a lion on that bill, and she's just fearless on bills like this that can be controversial. And she was the perfect sponsor for me on that bill. She worked with me hand in hand. We communicated back and forth, and she was not afraid to run into the fire with something that she knew she was probably going to get some pushback from the Senate. And she did a great job. I don't know that I could have been able to pass that bill without her on the Senate side.
Yeah. She's one of the best up there as far as taking on the things that we need to get passed. And of course, she still has to deal with her colleagues. But yeah, there's only a handful, and I'm sure you've only been up there 2 years, but I'm sure you've seen that pattern we talk about, not just that good bills go to the Senate to die, but that there's only a handful of good senators. There's 5, maybe 7 that consistently carry the good bills. She's one of them. Right. Senator Hensley, Senator Pody, and some others. I don't know. We've only got a handful. Senator Hensley, obviously. And that's a shame, because they get loaded down with all of these good bills, and then they go into committee, and like I say, a lot of times they'll go in there and not get a second. We had some bills this year, some very important bills, not even get a motion. Now we're a Republican supermajority in the House and Senate, and a Republican senator goes in there and proposes a bill, can't get a second, in a couple cases couldn't even get a motion. And that's our Senate is disgraceful. It is just flat out disgraceful. So I'm just hoping that we get rid of at least a few of those guys.
I was very frustrated at different times this year with senators that I thought that would, going into it, I went and approached them and asked them to carry a bill with me. And on the front end, they gave me a lot of positive response and feedback that they were all about the bill and they were excited about it. And then when push came to shove, they either refused to even present it in committee, or they presented it in such a way that they didn't even get a motion or a second. And that's very frustrating. When you put a lot of time and effort into drafting something up and working really hard on your side to work your bill and get enough votes to get it to the floor of the House, and then your counterpart on the Senate doesn't have the same burning fire that you do to get that bill passed. It's disappointing, to say the least. Yeah.
And for some of the audience that may not know, normally the Senate waits for it to at least make traction on the House side. And some want to wait for it to get all the way through, approved on the House floor. But so, yeah, you guys are taking the lead. You have to before some of them will even attempt to move a bill. And so, yeah, that makes it much more frustrating. You've done your part, and then, boom, just like that, it's killed in the Senate, maybe without a second. Heck, maybe without a motion. Any other Second Amendment bills, Second Amendment issues you'd like to talk about?
Well, look, I think we still have to work on this this deal about posted properties, and we have to balance this right between private property rights and Second Amendment, constitutionally protected Second Amendment rights. I just don't think it's right for someone not only that has a constitutional right to carry, but goes the extra step to get an enhanced carry permit, and it doesn't do them any good to be able to use it anywhere. I compare it similar to like the Fast Pass in Disney World. It doesn't make any sense to go through the extra effort and pay the extra cost to get the Fast Pass if it doesn't let me get to the front of the line. Right. So we're discouraging people from going out and getting an enhanced carry permit because it doesn't do anything for them. And so that I really want to push that notion and try to get my colleagues to understand that in order for us to try to get people to be responsible gun owners and go and get the training and do the extra steps of getting an enhanced carry permit, we have to give them some carrot in order to do that. And the carrot has to be more access into more places, more freedom to move about with their concealed carry weapon. And so I'm hoping that I can continue to push that. And it's also, it feeds into this whole notion and it's a false narrative that the Democrats create about guns getting stolen out of cars and that being some rash new thing that's only popped up in the last little bit. Well, part of the reason that it's become so much of an issue, and if you look at the timeline, is when the guns being stolen out of cars starts going up dramatically. It's the same time that they started saying that you can't carry your weapon into a private business. So most of us that are law-abiding gun owners, when we walk up to a business and see a sign, we don't break the law by just walking past it. We'll go back to our vehicle and we'll disarm ourselves and put our gun in our car. Bad guys sit there at the parking lots and watch that and wait for us to leave. So again, we're creating more trouble and more problems for people by trying to get this balance out of whack between private property rights and our constitutionally protected individual liberties. So again, that's just something I'm going to continue to harp on until I get somebody to listen to me up there.
Yeah. Well, and of course, the administration has made it worse because they claim that they passed constitutional carry a few years ago, but you can't go in all the same places with Bill Lee's so-called constitutional carry as you can with an enhanced permit. But a lot of people don't know that. They think, oh, I don't need it. I've got constitutional carry, but we don't have it. It's not real. Right. And you still, I would recommend anybody in Tennessee that they still want to get an enhanced carry permit because there's so many more places that you can carry it that you can't carry it under Bill Lee's phony constitutional carry. Not to mention if you're going to go to another state, you have the whole reciprocity issue. So that is something to think about.
The reciprocity is the only thing that really encourages people to do it right now, and that's wrong. We need to provide more incentive for folks to go get their enhanced carry permit.
Switching the topic here a little bit, House Bill 2159 had to do with obscenity and pornography in schools. Talk about the intent of this bill, the status, and let's talk about how it ended up and who opposed it.
So that was an obscenity bill that was actually a two-part bill. We had 2159 and 2160, and I ran those bills with Senator Paul Rose from Covington, Tennessee. And the 2160 was requiring age verification on pornographic websites. Now, we ended up passing an age verification bill that was sponsored by Representative Patsy Hazelwood, but that bill only related to the criminal part of the code, created a criminal crime. My bill was trying to deal with it from the civil side. It was going to create a civil cause of action through the Consumer Protection Act, which would give the Attorney General the authority to file a civil lawsuit for violations of that, and then also allow us as private citizens to have a private cause of action. As you can tell, there's a theme with me. I think citizens should be able to take matters into their own hands through the court system and have access to that, and not have to rely on an elected DA who may not want to run a case that he doesn't think he can win. And so, unfortunately, leadership kind of chose, and really on the Senate side, that's one of the bills that my Senate sponsor didn't even get a motion or a second on that age verification bill, because leadership decided that they were going to run with the Becky Massey and Patsy Hazelwood bill and not touch mine. Even though I tried for months to try to get them to merge the two bills together because they really could do the same thing. It could have been a great bill if we'd merged both of them together and tackled both, taking care of two birds with one stone. But that left us with 2159, which again was just a simple thing that allowed a civil right of action for a private citizen to be able to sue any person that violated the criminal obscenity statute in Tennessee. So a couple years ago, we created a law in Tennessee that says it's illegal to produce, distribute, deliver any type of obscene materials into the state or around the state. Not specific to schools in general, but it did kind of take in under the umbrella of the school system as well. And again, what we're seeing is district attorneys and law enforcement. The obscenity law is an area that's murky at best, and it's just not something that gets a lot of votes for district attorneys. They want to get the cases that they want to put rapists away and murderers and things like that and get good convictions. When you're spending a lot of time to prosecute some publisher that's maybe out of state, I don't know that gets a lot of splash for them and doesn't generate a lot of votes for them. So what I want to do is create an avenue for us to take it into our own hands. And for whatever reason, again, my Senate sponsor, Paul Rose, I got it passed, marched it through the House. I had all kinds of sponsors. I think we had every single member of the Republican caucus signed on to that bill as a co-sponsor.
In the House.
In the House side. And then my Senate sponsor, when he presented the bill, he claimed that we had some sort of typographical error or drafting error, and that the law needed to be changed to say, instead of you being able to sue for a violation of that criminal statute, you could only sue if there was a criminal conviction under that statute, which once again put the citizen at the mercy of a district attorney of actually taking up a case and prosecuting it and going through the years of time that it would take to get a conviction before you would have a right to sue for civil damages for that. So the issue that I had is that that obviously defeated the purpose of the bill, and it would leave us in a situation where if you had a teenage daughter whose photograph ends up on the web somewhere and is being exploited, you literally had no avenue to go after the folks that were exploiting your teenage daughter unless your district attorney decided to get on board and try to do something criminally. I tried to make that argument to my friends in the Senate, so they passed their amended version. I refused to adopt their version, and so we went back and forth and ended up in conference. And in conference, again, I tried to make this argument as to why we needed that bill to stay the way it was originally drafted. I made it very clear that it was not a drafting error; it was intentional. And Senator John Stevens, intimated to me that one of the big concerns that they had in the Senate side of things is that, well, this was just the way it was drafted originally was going to create a lot of frivolous lawsuits, and the only people that were going to make out on that were the trial attorneys, and it was just going to make things too difficult for the business people. To which I said, that's kind of the point of the bill. The whole idea is we want Tennessee to be a place where people don't want to do that kind of business.
Right.
They don't want to distribute obscene materials. They don't want to produce it and project it and deliver it into our state because they might get sued and they might have huge civil damages as a result of it. And I could not get that through to the members of that committee, that conference committee, which included Senator Stevens and Lundberg.
Is that the state and local government subcommittee, committee, state and local government committee on the Senate side?
Yes.
Okay. So, yeah, Senator Briggs runs that one, if I remember correctly.
Actually, you know what? Take that back. It went through judiciary because it was Todd Gardenhire was the chairman of the committee that set it up for Senator Rose to be able to make the amendment. And when I went to talk to Senator Gardenhire about it, he wouldn't have anything. He wouldn't have a conversation with me about it.
Wouldn't even talk to you?
No, like not even wouldn't even talk to me about it, what the issue was. I found out later that there was a lobbyist firm that went into his office and met with him. Somebody else just happened to be in the room at the time waiting to meet with him and overheard the conversation. But yeah, a lobbyist firm went in there to meet with him about that bill in particular and wanting to get that amendment made because they were worried about some of their clients were worried that they were going to have some exposure.
So they were worried that some of their clients that were distributing porn and obscenity, and this was was not just for school. This was not just on school grounds, but this was just in general. But if it involved minors, it had to involve minors.
You got it. That's right.
And they were worried about that. And Senator Stevens, did he say who he was worried about this hurting? Just businesses in general?
He wouldn't name a specific business or industry that he was worried about. He just said that the trial lawyers were just going to make a bunch of money off it.
Okay. You know, here's the thing on that, and I want to get some clarification on this other legislation you talked about. But last year, now we talked, myself, several other people involved in the GOP at different levels, had a phone conversation with Senator Stevens in reference to a bill that was passed by Senator Lynn in 23, I believe. And that bill was basically to keep obscenity and pornography, made it illegal to have it on school grounds. Okay, and there was a criminal penalty. It was made a felony. I don't remember what level. And that one's not being enforced because, like you said, the DAs, for whatever reason, don't like it. Now, one of the things that Senator Stevens told us was, well, it's got to pass. There's a Supreme Court test that was created years ago on the whole obscenity, and I cannot remember the name of the test. The
Miller test.
The Miller test, yeah. They had, well, you got to use the Miller test, and this is just not a good law. And I'm thinking to myself, we are deferring to a Supreme Court Miller test, and we can't protect our kids from porn here in Tennessee. How insane is that? I mean, that irritates me. But so he says you can't do it for criminal and you can't do it for civil. So Senator Stevens, when can we do it? That's my question. When can we do it? When can we protect our kids? I mean, we're talking kids here. We're not talking adults.
And what I really couldn't understand in the whole thing with Senator Stevens in particular being a lawyer, I mean, filing a lawsuit right now or passing a bill that might get challenged is not the worst thing in the world with the Supreme Court that we currently are dealing with. This is the time now where we need to push the envelope on some of these things, even if we think that they might get challenged and taken up, because we are in the catbird seat when it comes to the Supreme Court. It's not going to be that way forever. So we need to make hay while the sun is shining, and we need to pass some bills that we want somebody to sue us on. We want these things to get taken up so that we can establish some precedent that's going to help us stand the test of time going forward.
And if your standard is we might get sued, you won't stand for anything because anybody can sue anybody over anything. So 100%. That's just a coward BS excuse is all that is. Okay, so I do want to clarify something, though. You mentioned Senator Massey and Representative Hazelwood passed a bill related to the criminal aspect of this?
So their bill was age verification required for pornographic websites. Now, again, pornography and obscenity are two different things.
Right.
Pornography is protected by the First Amendment. Obscenity is not. So their bill required an age verification for pornographic websites to allow parents to be able to have some sort of control over whether or not these websites are getting through. But it was basically dealing with and creating some criminal code and criminal penalties that for the carrier, not necessarily the carrier, but the websites themselves, if they failed to put any of those age verification checkpoints or safety protocols in place.
Okay.
My bill that was kind of mirroring that didn't deal with the criminal portion of the code. It dealt with the Tennessee Consumer Protection Act that said if you do business in Tennessee and you don't have age verification on your website, then the state of Tennessee can sue you for damages and come at you under the Consumer Protection Act. and also any citizen that was individually damaged can also come forward with that.
Okay.
And I worked on both of these bills, both these civil right of action for violation of the criminal code and this age verification bill for almost a year with Jamison Taylor of American Family Alliance or American Family Action.
Yep.
And so we modeled this at what happened in Louisiana and Oklahoma and Texas and how those bills had been challenged. And so we had really strong language that we were comfortable with if we had any type of legal challenge after getting it passed, that we were ready to go forward and defend that. And again, I tried to have some conversations with the folks that were running the other bill, try to marry those languages together, put them together with Mr. Taylor and AFA and see if we couldn't make things even better. Put my bill and their bill together, take the best parts and have a super bill. But there was no interest in doing that, particularly on the Senate side.
And theirs would have required a DA to have prosecuted, correct?
Yeah. Again, it creates criminal offenses, which the criminal offenses are going to have to be prosecuted by a district attorney.
Okay. All right. Well, hey, any closing thoughts or anything else you want to hit on?
Well, no. I mean, I'm running for re-election. I do have a primary challenger, and if you live in Hickman, Lewis, or my part of Dixon County, I certainly hope you'll support me and vote for me. I'm definitely a conservative, and my record has shown that. I tell people quite a bit that you're looking at something that you're probably not used to seeing, and that's a politician that does exactly what he said he was going to do. I told everybody 2 years ago that when I ran, I wasn't going up there to make friends with anybody or climb up the ranks or anything like that. I was going just to do what I thought was best for our district and to do what the people wanted me to do. My job's to say what they would say and vote the way they would vote if they were sitting in the chair at the same time that I am. And so that's what I've tried to do, and I hope that they'll send me back.
And okay, there's your website is up there.
Yes, sir.
And I do have one alibi question. I meant to ask you this earlier, and this is in reference to nullification, because I always talk about nullification. And I think, did you co-sponsor? I think you were a co-sponsor on Representative Halsey's bill in 2023.
Both of them.
Okay.
Both of them.
Okay.
Yep.
So I'm assuming we can count on you this upcoming session.
100%. That bill has to get passed.
Absolutely. And he did a great job presenting that. I mean, that should be mandatory. All of our school kids should have to watch that. I mean, they would get probably more of a history lesson in that 20 minutes or so that he took than they'll probably get all year, unfortunately.
Let me tell you something. Representative Halsey is a guy that'll sneak up on you. At first glance, with he's disheveled and maybe not as put together as some of the other representatives up there, but he's got his stuff together and he knows exactly what's going on. And if you hang out with that guy long enough, you're going to learn something just about every day you're around him.
Yeah, he's got a first-rate mind, and he's there for all the right reasons. Absolutely there for all the right reasons. Well, hey, I appreciate you coming on the show. Thanks for what you do. Good luck to you.
Thank you, sir. Thanks again for having me on.
Thank you for coming on. I want to thank you all for taking the time to watch our program tonight. Please be sure to hit the like and subscribe button as well as the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Our podcasts are also available on iHeartRadio, Spotify, and other popular platforms. Please check them out. Sign up for our weekly newsletter, visit our website at teeninformer.com, and the same to follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and share us with your friends. Join us next week for a 2 for Tuesday special. First, Dr. Ken Berry will join us for a live show at a special time, 3 p.m., to talk about the 4 boxes of freedom: the soap box, the jury box, the ballot box, and the cartridge box. Hopefully we don't have to use the last one. Throughout history, one of these boxes will always be chosen. And then, in case you were thinking we didn't have enough laws on the books, at 7 p.m. we dig into the list of the 200 new laws that are scheduled to take effect this July 1st and could affect you. You'll probably break one of those laws before you even know it's on the books. You need to be aware. So please catch our 4th of July special at 6 p.m. featuring our guest and friend Mike Meharry from the 10th Amendment Center. We're talking about the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, states' rights, and your liberty, and what can be done to restore and secure those liberties. You don't want to miss this. Hope you'll join us. That's it for now. Good night from Paris, Tennessee, that is.